Welcome, everyone, to today's Regenerative Finance Aligned Voter Committee subcommittee meeting. This week, the support scope is in focus, and I am just going to hand it right over to our special guests who have prepared a presentation, and they need no introduction, although, of course, lots of people will watch this recording hopefully in the future, but I'm sure they will introduce themselves. And so welcome. Thank you, Powerhouse, for being here, and the floor is yours. Did I skip a step? Okay, you're getting organized, I guess.
Maybe an internet issue or something, I'm not sure. Let me message him, find out.
Okay. We're having some technical difficulties, I think. Were you planning to screen share? I think so, yes?
Yeah, I believe that was the plan.
Okay, all right, we'll sit tight. I'll get that Jeopardy music bot going. Last week, we really enjoyed the second half of our meeting as text only in the chat. I know other groups, other voter committees, some are exclusively all of the time text only. So I think we all really enjoyed that. We'll experiment with that in the future, in future meetings.
Yes, hi everyone, and apologies for the hiccup. We're in Toronto together with the team, where we had an offsite and joined the East Toronto conference. But that's why we need to figure out the Wi-Fi connection. So let me try and share my screen. Okay, so apparently Discord doesn't let me connect both from my phone and my computer, but I hope this will work. So
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, great. Let's get it going. There we go. So we'll get right into it then. If I'm breaking up, please put something in chat so that I'm aware. But this should work all right. So the presentation we have prepared today is to create a little bit more clarity as we are discussing the support scope, which role Powerhouse can play to implement the different articles that are in the Atlas and the support scope framework, and specifically talk about the systematic approach that we would like to propose to tackle the different items on our roadmap, but also to work closer together with the community and collect feedback, especially from ABCs and delegates, and make it more of a co-creation process rather than just us doing analysis separately and producing the software and feature that we do. So let me get right into it. So as I mentioned, we do want to make that connection to the support scope. I'm not going to go through all the articles in detail, but as you probably know, one of the So the first articles of the support scope, they are about governance process support, making sure that Maker governance is running smoothly. And it is tightly coupled to the DAO Toolkit core development. And this is exactly the area where we do the work that we're doing. So we are looking at the processes, and we're making sure that the DAO Toolkit will be software that can maximally support those processes. If you want to read all the details about Powerhouse, I recommend reading the full forum thread that we posted with the ecosystem actor introduction. But as a recap, so there are 3 Powerhouse services that we're offering. And I think we'll quickly see how they relate to the process automation at MakerDAO. So first of all, we offer a service where we help with decentralized org design and business process analysis. And so we'll get into that in a lot more detail. But this is our work helping to identify, for example, not just the governance processes that we're all quite familiar with, such as token holder voting and the executive votes and polling, but also the processes that are more sitting on the operational side of things. So, for example, creating more transparency around roadmaps and deliverables, or making sure that when there is smart contract development, that there is an overview of the security audits that have happened, or when working with ecosystem actors and other outside parties, making sure that there is transparency about the operational expenses and so on. Now, the way that we do this is not just to analyze the process and bring structure to that, but most importantly, we turn those processes into software to make them as automated as possible. And so the way that we do that is we're building a general platform for decentralized and open organizations, fully open source. And it's comprised of 5 products that we'll briefly cover. And for these products, we are building these modules that help the organization in the various governance and operational tasks that it needs to conduct. And then lastly, we don't just do the analysis and build that software. We also make sure that we can work with all the stakeholders to actually get the process and the software adopted. Because just delivering software isn't enough. We need to work with everyone involved to make sure that there's proper onboarding, and then also some processes just need continued maintenance and support that we are partially offering. So we're not offering this for all the operational processes, because very often there is a great deal of expertise and specialization involved. But the more general ones, we definitely want to offer also the operational support in those areas. I'm not going to go into all the detail of those. I think you got a pretty good idea. We'll publish the presentation on the forum as well. And as I said, if you want to learn more, there's also the ecosystem actor introduction post that we made a couple of months ago. The one thing I want to return to quickly is the 5 products that I mentioned. So these are 5 pieces of general open source software that we're developing first for MakerDAO, but we're building them in a way that they will be generic and reusable by other sub-DAOs. So not just Maker Core, but also the sub-DAOs if they want to, and also other DAOs. And this will be beneficial not just for the other DAOs, but also for Maker, because this means that in the longer term, Maker does not have to continue to bear the full brunt of the development, the cost of these different products and modules. And again, everything is open source, so we maximally encourage contributions from the wider community. And as we're getting started with everything and we create more visibility, we're looking forward to what that will bring. So The 5 products that we are developing, they're Fusion, which is a public collaboration and transparency platform. It's Renown, which is a decentralized identity and reputation hub. It's Connect, which is a private contributor tool. It's an academy platform. We launched a prototype of MakerDAO earlier. Today, this is on hold, but we strongly believe that for the future vision, this should be included as part of the platform. And then last but not least, all the data that is available through these products is also available through an open data API. So this is one place where all the operational data and the governance data of the organization is available. And that can be used either by data analysts to create their own custom reports or data analyses, or by other developers to add additional apps on top of the platform that we're building. If there are questions or comments, feel free to interrupt me. I'm not seeing the chat, so it might be good to grab the mic. So with these products, this is how we want to structure things in the future. We want to have Fusion, Connect, Renown, Switchboard, and Academy products as I mentioned, as generic software usable not just for Maker, but also for other DAOs. The way that we're doing this is we're not starting from scratch and throwing away all the work that already happened. So we are gradually evolving the Maker-specific platforms that we have built and others have contributed, and we're turning them into these generic products that can have better reuse. So, for example, the Fusion open and transparent collaboration platform will be a future evolution of the current expenses dashboard that we have. We have a prototype budget tool that the Koreans are using to report their expenses, which is at the moment a rough prototype that needs to be improved. So this will be evolved into the Connect application. For some, we haven't even started yet. So for Renown, there's the decentralized identity and reputation portal, which currently has no prototype available. Although we are working on a very early prototype actually for the hackathon that's going on here at East Toronto. So that's pretty exciting. Switchboard then, so the API that will bring all the data together from the other operational tools is already available, but currently focuses on the expenses dashboard data. And then, as I mentioned, we already built a Maker Academy prototype, which is currently on hold, but will later be reintroduced as part of the full suite. So now that we have a basic idea of the products and what we're looking to contribute, I would like to talk a bit more about the workflow that we have in mind to start working more systematically on implementing the critical processes within MakerDAO into software, and as much as possible automate them and integrate them with blockchain technology. So the way that we do this, and we have a couple of examples, is that first we do our need analysis, which is basically just a brainstorm of all the different processes and data models that are that play a role in the organization. So, for example, when we think about the roadmaps and milestones, we probably want some transparency reporting by the ecosystem actors as they are mapping out their roadmaps, and want some regular progress reporting. So that's one example of a process with some data attached to that. Of course, you're well familiar with the AVC processes and data that is involved with that. We have the financial transparency reporting processes and data. We have the governance processes and data, and so on. So we make a big list of that and try to figure out what the priorities are. So we can't implement everything at once in software. So we need to go one by one. And we want to make sure that we're working on the stuff that has the highest priority. So once this needs analysis is done, we move into the business analysis, which is really diving into the details of these processes and the document models, and also creating some conceptual wireframes to clarify what the process functionality and the data is all about. From there, it moves into product design and business logic development in parallel. So once we have the specifications in place, we can create the visual presentation on the dashboard, and we can create also what we call our document editor, which allows contributors to edit the data that we have modeled and identified in a user-friendly way. That also supports standardization, that keeps the data in a structured format so that it can be interpreted by other applications, by bots, automation bots, in the future also by AI. And then, we also make sure that these the document editors, they implement best practices so that we don't have to install a top-down management hierarchy, something like that, to explain to all the different teams and enforce the best practices that they should follow. Rather, these best practices are embedded in the software, which we believe is the right way to go in decentralized organizations. As I said, in parallel, the business logic development goes on. So what this does is this defines who can modify which data and when it can be modified. So for example, if it is the role of AVCs to propose changes to the scope frameworks, then we can model that, and we can make sure that so we define which data elements exactly can be updated by the AVCs when, and also when they are activated, for example, through a vote. And then the second part of that are the API read models. So this is not concerning as much the roles and the permissions of the different stakeholders in the system, but rather looking at the analytic side of things. So which kind of summaries, which kind of aggregated data views do you want to create for this new data in the organization? Once the design and the business logic components are developed, then we move on to the UI development. So this is the implementation of the design. Make sure that those editors that we defined, they're properly implemented in the correct product, which in this case is Connect, and then also make sure that the presentation layer is present in the Fusion dashboard screens. And then, as I mentioned, last but not least, software is in itself not enough. We need to make sure that when the feature is released, that we also pay proper attention to onboarding and making sure that the processes are actually adopted. And this is also the time when there is the opportunity to iterate on the functionality and make sure that we're creating software that really fits the processes of the organization very well. So to give a few examples, I'll just quickly go through this and then make time for a Q&A. So this needs analysis is, as I mentioned, discovering, identifying, defining, and prioritizing the greatest needs in terms of process automation. So based on expert advice, community feedback, and project management constraints, we go from a long list of ideas and basically prioritize it into a short list of the highest priority items. And this is one example where we would very much like to work with the AVCs and the ADs to help us identify, analyze, and prioritize these items on the roadmap. In fact, we'll be sharing a link after this call to encourage everyone to vote on the things that you think are the highest priority to work on in terms of software processes and automation. As I mentioned, the business analysis that we're doing, it is process modeling. It also involves the conceptual wireframes and the document models. So I think yeah, most of you will have some idea what that will look like. Here is an example of a conceptual wireframe of the roadmap, like how progress reporting can be done by the different ecosystem actors and stakeholders in the MakerDAO system. Or, for example, a typical process where a document moves from draft status to review, where it is reviewed by an auditor and can then be moved to final status or maybe an escalated status. Talked about the product design. So yeah, these are the document editors and the dashboard representation of the data, as well as the business logic. And so the business logic is more a software component where we strictly define the structure of the data, which makes it machine readable and possible for bots and AI agents to process and to work with. And this is the part that is also very important for standardization and, for example, interoperability between MakerCore and the sub-DAOs, or between MakerDAO and other DAOs, or the sub-DAOs and other DAOs, and so on. UI development. So this is the editors that we were talking about. So, for example, for budget statements, there is currently the core units reporting tool, which is not super user-friendly. And so we are working to implement better UIs to make that all user-friendly and make it very easy for the different parties that are involved to follow these best practices that I was talking about. And then we also want to know how that data will be shown, for example, in the Fusion operations platform. Onboarding and release, I think I made a point. So releasing the software in itself is not good enough. We need to make sure that the processes and the data are actually properly adopted by the community and are held up to date so that they become real, useful working tools. So in terms of the timeline, currently we have our ongoing feature development, which is the finances and the project features that will soon be adding to what is today the expenses dashboard. The reason why today this is still progressing relatively slowly is because we are in parallel still very much working on the base infrastructure. And the base infrastructure is aimed at automating the process that we just looked at. So going from needs analysis to business analysis to editors, like document data model development and so on, to make that process as fast and efficient as possible. So as we are continuing to work on this, we'll be able to speed up the rate at which we release new features significantly. But today we are still working on that base infrastructure. And there's one item on the roadmap that was identified as quite high priority to get right soon with more standardized manual processes, but then also as a priority to convert it to software, and that is real-world asset reporting. And so that's the one that we've singled out as the target, probably around January, to have the full workflow of real-world assets reporting in place, where stakeholders will be able to see all the different real-world assets reports in standardized formats, where they will be able to verify that these reports are signed by the proper parties, and where the data of those reports is properly summarized as well. So while we are doing this development, we can already get started with the needs analysis and the business analysis of the other processes and data models that the organization will be using. And this is the part where we would love to collaborate a lot more with the community. And I hope to talk more about that in a moment. As I mentioned, the work today is a lot focused on the base infrastructure, which will make it easier in the future to release these kind of features much faster than we are doing today. And so that's the last piece that we need to put in place, is that the systematic process automation, the process that I've outlined throughout the slides, to make sure that that is automated as well as possible, and that we can really speed up the development of that. I believe that that will kick off shortly after the January target of the real assets reporting. So real world assets reporting will become the example that we implement for the first time, to then repeat the same patterns and tools to systematically have it followed up with a lot more processes and data. And yeah, I believe that's it for the presentation. So happy to take questions, and then we'll also share the link so that everyone can already get involved in helping us to identify those priorities.
Should we do a quick preview of the trail that we set up so people know how to use it?
Just checking to see if you all can hear me. My internet seems to be lagging.
Yeah, I can hear you fine.
Yeah, I think I'm lagging. Okay. Great. Well, thank you. That was really terrific. And we have some questions in the chat. Just wanting to make sure that you all are hearing me. Sounds like yes. Okay. Let me go to the top of my screen. And I'll start with Bona Publica's comment question. What are some of the intelligence insights that you believe your modules will produce, such as perhaps a third party building out of a wallet or a tool related to end user financial goals? And I also had a question, which is, should we consider everything you presented, is that the DAO toolkit? Is that what we've just learned about?
Yes, indeed. So the DAO toolkit is basically the Maker implementation of the platform that we're developing. So we developed the generic software, and then we customize this for Maker, and this is the MakerDAO toolkit. So the question about which intelligence insights these modules can produce. So the most obvious one is that it should bring a lot more transparency and understanding into the operations of MakerDAO. So for example, on previous calls, we discussed that it's really very difficult to get a good overview of the roadmaps and the milestones that MakerDAO ecosystem actors have defined, and even more difficult to tie it back to the budgets and then see the deliverables of those milestones and projects that were approved. And so this is something that is that's just missing today.
Seems like Toronto and New York have the same internet problems right now, maybe.
Yeah, apologies. Can everyone hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, while the typing is happening, and I hope I'm not speaking over anyone, I'll just keep going. Okay, great. I'll just keep going and just read through the comments, which of course everyone can also see. And so feel free when we get, mute myself. Okay.
Yeah, all right. So the first one that I just mentioned is a relatively obvious one. It's the work that's ongoing, the progress reporting, those kind of basic information pieces that we would expect to be available in an open and decentralized organization, but that are today very much buried in a lot of forum posts, internal chat channels, and so on. Right, I think that's one. In the different specialized areas around finances as well, as I mentioned, there's a lot of questions about real-world assets reporting, and while we are not the experts who define what the right reporting format is, we work with the stakeholders to determine the right reporting format, and then we make sure that it is standardized across the board, and that the different contributors that are involved, that they have access to the tools to do that kind of reporting, and make it very easy to analyze and see that everything is in order. You might think a little bit further, and once you have those insights, you can actually start doing proper auditing and reviewing, for example. And this is another part that currently is missing from the DAO, that we believe still needs to be developed as a function, which is auditing and quality control. And so it will be possible directly on the platform. If we have data in a structured format, what we can develop are, for example, evaluation models or evaluation criteria to, for example, score, again, real-world asset contributor on their reporting, or make the audits that already are happening, such as the smart contracts audits, or a few things that are already being audited, to make that more available and make it clear that everything is covered and that there aren't any problematic aspects in these elements. So I mentioned work, I mentioned finances, mentioned auditing, quality control. To me, this still is very much the basic stuff. In the future, what we're really excited about is that once we have all that data available in a structured format, that you can plug it into the reputation system and start creating a platform where people who are continuously delivering good work, that they can build up a good reputation, which will help us to retain the best talent and also create something valuable for the contributors that they want to care about, and make sure that they don't lose their reputation by acting in a way that isn't aligned with the goals of MakerDAO, for example, and to start replacing that middle management hierarchy that you see in traditional organizations with a real alternative, because removing it is very popular always, but we need to have an alternative in place that holds everyone accountable for the responsibilities that they're picking up. And you can't do that if you don't have the data available and are able to connect the dots. And so once we have that data available, we feed it into a reputation system, and we can make it really worthwhile for contributors to do their best and stay aligned with the higher level goals and the vision of MakerDAO. So I'll go through the comments in the chat. So Navigator says, we'd be interested to hear more about the AI project. As I mentioned, the first goal is to get the structured data in place. Then we can leverage that structured data with things such as reputation systems and reviews. Once you have the structured data available, it's not just available to humans or to hard-coded scripts, it's also available to AI bots. And so that's what we want to experiment with as well. So, for example, the auditing and reviews that I was talking about, the way to think about it is similar to a review function on Amazon or Airbnb, something like that. Or maybe like a reputation on Uber, where people leave a quick review to add or detract from the reputation of the individual contributor. Well, these kind of micro actions might actually turn out that there are today AI tools available that can assist in that. And this can take multiple forms. So the most extreme version of that would be that there is no user interaction involved anymore, but that it's the AI, for example, scoring the quality of the deliverables. But we're probably quite far off from that kind of ideal. So rather what it would start with is that using the structured data, the AI would start to help summarize information and highlight outliers that can be indicative of a problem or something that's going on. You can also imagine an AI actually putting adding reviews to the platform, and then using the social functions to up and down vote those reviews to give the feedback back to the AI, indicating whether the reviews are valuable or not. So feeding into the learning process of the AI. And then as we are creating these experiments on top of the structured data that is available, create these AI agents that might take over small portions or bigger portions of the contributor workflow. And then, of course, we want to see how much we can push it. And the ultimate goal is to have a large part of governance automated, especially the auditing and reviewing part. And this is also in line with what Bona Publica was commenting in the chat. Zero Defensor is saying happy to help prioritize. So we'll share a link in a moment where you can already go and vote on the processes and data that you believe should be transitioned into software as soon as possible. And we'll make it a long-living forum thread so that we can use it to continue the collaboration and feedback. And then some further comments on the AI. True Name is asking, what are your views on reducing this workflow to written text incorporated via amendments in the relevant scopes, including the current stage of proposing to engage with the community to iterate and co-create? So the view of the scopes is to see them as one layer, as it were, in the data in the organization. And there is a varying degree of modifiability of that data. So at the very top, we have the atlas, which even though today is still in an early phase and can still be changed, the vision of that is that it really grows into a solid set of rules that wouldn't need to be changed very often. In fact, would be very difficult to change. Then you have the scope frameworks that contain still fairly long-term rules and long-running instructions that can be changed once a quarter. And then, as part of the scope frameworks, you have what are called I believe the active elements or something like that, which indicates data that can be much more easily and much more frequently updated. And so this is kind of a model that we definitely support. The only nuance that I would add is that, not necessarily everything has to be in one giant document. I think it would be better to think about it as a document drive, which is like quite literally the feature that we're building for Connect. It will be a document drive that has, for example, the Atlas document, that has the scope framework documents, and that, for example, has the official list of AVCs. And all these pieces of data, they have different rules. So when and how they can be updated, and who has permission to update it. Sometimes it can be as simple as the scope facilitator owns this data and can update it without asking permission to anyone. But sometimes it will require a lot more to change the data. So the whole process of having the governance polls where token holders are voting on changes to the rules, that is basically a specific case of the more general process that we are putting in place. And so to return, with that as context, to return to the question, so the workflow that we are following, that could definitely be made a part of the scope frameworks, and we can start out like just adding it as text paragraphs. But the process model that we are working on will actually be a different way, more specific way, to define processes and permissions and define who can change which data and what the structure of that data is. And so that's our hope, that the process that I've described in the slides will be one of those processes that will also help to turn into software and automate. And so the follow-up question, who is the best ecosystem participant to manage the documentation of the effort into rule set and keep it in sync with what is actually happening? So I think a lot, I partially answered this already. So I think that this is a complicated question that will depend on the situation. Sometimes some piece of data cannot be changed other than through a very high-profile vote. And sometimes it's as easy as the scope facilitator can just edit the document at will. Talking more pragmatically in the short term, where it indeed will be needed to keep the data in sync. If you think about it, Gov Alpha is already doing this in a way with the GitHub repositories. If you are submitting a new proposal, if you are creating a new profile for an AVC, maybe you are not submitting the GitHub pull request yourself, but behind the scenes, that's what's happening. The GitHub pull request is done, which is textual data, not structured. But then someone from GovAlpha merges it in. And so we need to evolve from this situation, which is already like a proto version of what we're trying to achieve, gradually in steps to a situation where the same process kind of happens, but it's on structured data, and we have better decentralized infrastructure, and there is a much greater variety in the rules and permissions that we can define, who can access what data. And it's those rules that I think will make up a big part of what the scope framework actually is. That was a little abstract. I hope it's clear. Then ZeroX Defensor is asking, has it been considered to make the reporting available in text and numbers only on the forum to begin with? Yes. And that's the approach that we'll be going for. So an important comment there is that, as I mentioned for the real world asset reports, we are not actually the experts, at least not in those particular areas, of what those reports should look like. And so it's a very good example because for the real world asset reporting, what we will do is work with the experts. So we're working with Block Analytica, we're working with Stakehouse to determine what the correct standardized reporting format will be. And so this is exactly the needs analysis and the business analysis that I was talking about in the processes. Yes, those reports should start out as much as possible just manually until we are sure what we want to see in the software. And this is an important point to understand, is that you want to get started with these things manually because developing the software, definitely in this phase of the project, will still lag behind the practice of the actual reporting, for example, with quite a few months. As we are finishing up the base infrastructure, it's our intention that it will be so easy and quick to model a process and a new document format that the tool will actually be used for the discovery phase as well. So that, for example, someone creates a draft document model, and then you can already start using that and then make changes on the go. But this requires much better tooling, and that's what we're still working on. Bona Publica is saying, scan through the Frillboard, I think, quickly. Is there an option to vote for a switchboard module that could be configured to send alerts to ADs? We'll add that one to the list as a suggestion. I think it's a very interesting one. So that one will need to it will be almost trivial to implement once we have the base infrastructure in place, because the Connect app, which uses, as I talked about last time, it uses a decentralized distributed messaging network matrix, which is the same one used, for example, by the Element chat app. So it's end-to-end encrypted and all that. And so once we have that in place, Connect will have mechanisms where data is synchronized automatically between your own local instance and a remote instance that you can configure yourself. And then the next step would be, as these changes come in, to give the user the option to create an alert for something specific. So you could follow a specific document, or you could subscribe to a specific event. For example, every time a new AVC is created, I want to see a pop-up or something. Like that kind of functionality, it plays very naturally with the base infrastructure that we're putting in place. And so we'll add this one to the list because I think many people see the value of that. Is the AI layer integrated into the software? As in, is there user feedback prompts in place to improve AI functionality? So this one I already covered. So absolutely. So the way that we could do it is that we could implement an AI bot that behaves as a user, and the same feedback mechanisms that we use to correct user behavior. For example, someone makes a review and the review is really unfair, well, then we should be able to downvote that review. And for AI bots, it's the same thing, where they take that input into the learning algorithm, the learning feedback loop, to improve the algorithm itself. What do you have in mind that would offer improvements when compared to using Discord for sending alerts to ADs? So even though you can receive your alerts through Connect, it's really a small thing to then forward it to Discord. So the same way that, for example, the KISS AVC is using a bridge between the Element chat app and Discord. The same way you could write an integration that sends those alerts to Discord as well. Specifically on the combination Discord and alerts, I think that point was made elsewhere. Discord is a very noisy environment, so I'm not sure if that one will be the best app to receive your alerts because you might miss them. Depends on the urgency of the alert. Maybe it is. Maybe you want to review your alerts as part of your catching up with the daily messages. But the point is, once we have the base infrastructure in place, it will be really quite easy to add those bridges. Yes, and as Bonum Publica is saying, what I just mentioned, there is there is a whole range of urgency in the kind of notifications that you would want. So we'll need to think about how to make that feature as useful and user-friendly as possible, where if there is an urgent alert, an emergency that it breaks through everything and you definitely get it. But on the other hand, the more day-to-day stuff that it's easier to just review the alerts and or notifications and not have it interrupt yourself. Xerox Defensor says, I recommend you ask the VCs who already hold MKR what documentation they would need to do full due diligence of Maker with its RWA setup. They have dedicated teams for this, and the list might be easy to provide for them. If you get that right, might open the door to more institutional capital. Yes, and so I think that's a great recommendation. In first instance, we'll just ask BA Labs and Steakhouse if that's what they did. If not, if they want to do it. Of course, if needed, we can also reach out ourselves. We have been working on some text for the stability scope, writes true name, that would set some standards as to timing for when a proposal can go to on-chain polling. Does the operations workflow you have scoped so far identify checklists of items such as risk reports posted by specific ecosystem actors, legal analysis, or other things the community might want to make sure have been completed before a vote? No. So, and that is actually, so maybe this is a good point to recap how we would like to collaborate with the broader community. But more specifically with AVCs and ADs quite intensively. So one is what I already mentioned, is prioritizing and identifying the processes and data models, and then also going maybe a step further and co-create a definition of those document models and those processes. The second way of collaborating is more from the role as a stakeholder user, to have AVCs and ADs and other stakeholders provide feedback on the features that are in development. So we've seen these different phases going from the needs analysis to the business analysis to the development to the release. After each one of these phases, there's a potential for feedback. And of course, as many will know, the sooner in the process you capture the feedback, the cheaper it is to correct course. And then the third element where to collaborate is exactly what you're mentioning. It is to identify those evaluation criteria, so to strengthen the auditor function, to strengthen the control, but also, before the fact. So, for example, the criteria that a proposal should adhere to before it's even put up for a vote. So these are the kind of things that we can structure the discussion, we can structure the conversation, but ultimately the input has to come from MakerDAO and its community. Bona Publica is asking, might have missed it, but how will renowned identities that are intended to be pseudonymous and anonymous, how will they continue to have their privacy? So first of all, the pseudonymous and anonymous, our vision is that pseudonymity is great, anonymity is not. And so our whole construct of social trust, which is needed in order to collaborate and work together in a way that that is sustainable, it relies on reputation, on having a continuous identity, which is building up reputation, and that people after a while understand that they can trust for certain things. And so that is a pseudonymous identity. And so the way that that this will be done is, in first instance, it doesn't need zero knowledge proofs. So this will make for some great optimizations and like really nail it down. But we can get started with this without any zero knowledge proofs whatsoever. So earlier today, we talked to the people from the EAP project, so the Ethereum attestation protocol. And that's basically the mechanism that you would use. So throughout the work that's done on the operational platform, what happens is that everything is tied back to your Ethereum identity. So for example, when you're using Connect to submit a project proposal, the Connect app will sign this project proposal with a signature that your primary Ethereum identity has attested to. So the primary Ethereum identity says, I trust this app to sign documents on my behalf. That is the attestation. And then when, as a contributor, you do this once, so you put this attestation in place, and then you're good to go. And you can just use Connect as you were using Google Drive or something like that. But Connect will sign all the changes that you're making to the documents with a key that you attested to. So now we know that you were the one editing this document. Also, the content of the document. So for example, when a team is delivering a successful project, they would need to report like who of the pseudonymous contributors have worked on the project. And this doesn't happen just once at the very end, it happens continuously, right? And so what we're doing is we're collecting all these attestation facts, these events, and then we're defining rules as to how that will influence your reputation. And so to give an example, if some party submits a smart contract audit, for example, you would think that's quite valuable. But actually, submitting a smart contracts audit in itself as like a standalone thing is not valuable at all, because that says nothing about the quality of the audit. Is the finding correct, or is it just, might just be wrong, might just be low quality, So that in itself doesn't add a lot to your reputation. But if you submit, on the other hand, a smart contracts audit, and then it gets a whole bunch of positive feedback from the community, that's when your reputation is unlocked. And so this will add greatly to the reputation, your pseudonymous profile on Renown. Sometime later, like you might be building up that reputation, that's probably good enough to land you, a job as auditor and get a really good pay for it. Sometime later, if it turns out that you abuse your role as auditor and try to rug the protocol, well, hopefully the control mechanisms were in place to catch it before you would succeed, but that would then slash your reputation and you would no longer be considered as a valuable auditor that can work with the project. And so this happens purely pseudonymously. So we don't need to know your real world identity to set up this system. And this is basically the thing that we're aiming for. There's a lot of nuances and complications and complexities involved, but this is a long-term roadmap, and but this is just a long-term goal that we're working towards. So True Name says, it sounds from what you were saying and your answer to earlier questions will be more productive to address standards. For example, for proposals to go to vote and in the process that you are discussing here, rather than hard code some points in the scopes today. I would definitely recommend that. I think the discussion on the forum itself will also be valuable, and this is part of the infrastructure term, like the consensus seeking infrastructure that was missing from the early MakerDAO, which really only had the MKR majority vote at the end, which could, for example, just throw out of the window months of work. So yes, if we can co-create this and embed the feedback from everyone, it will be much more effective, even if it will take a little bit longer to get it to the vote. This way, the standards, they are integrated in the software architecture. And so looking forward also to hear comment from the others.
Well, this has been great. Thank you so much, and apologies for my internet issues. How's everybody feeling about that? That's a lot to digest. We got some meat to chew on. I love it. This is really exciting. Your team's been really hard at work. I'm so glad for our amazing delegates. You got your work cut out for you. We're looking forward to having your support on navigating this work. But I know I speak for Space Exponential and Mike from Abundance DAO that we are very, very, very much looking forward to co-creating with Powerhouse and the whole community on some of this heavy lifting, which is going to pay enormous dividends, not just for us and not just for Maker, but I'm excited about the composability. Any of you all who are supporting or following composability, they'll be so excited by this presentation, composable ABC, and the network effects. And I mean, I think all of this difficult work that's happening now is going to be a boon to the entire industry and therefore all of finance. And that's very exciting. So with that, we'll conclude and we'll continue. We'll just continue on. We'll have another meeting next week, and we look forward to the follow-up posts on the forum. And just want to thank the Powerhouse team. It's really been an honor for Refi to be able to host, this unveiling and all this information. So thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your day, morning, evening, as it were. Bye-bye.